What do you get when you combine dreams like singing, sonic healing, and mediumship? A beautiful offering of healing and expansion for the listener. Laura Carbone joins Mystical Sisterhood today to share how nature spoke to her as a child, both playing in the forest in Germany and through symbolic dreams. Laura channeled her gifts through her singing voice in a band, and when the pandemic happened, she shifted the form of how she offered her gifts to the world. Listen in today for your reconnection to nature, tapping into our ancestors, transforming shame, and sonic healing. Thank you for being with us today. Welcome back to Mystical Sisterhood. Today's guest is Laura Carbone. I'm really excited to have you, Laura. You are a musician, a psychic medium. You specialize in the tarot and sound healing, amongst other gifts. And your name came to me, I'll say to the listener, through, I believe, more of a public relations or a PR person. And so I love to get these messages in my inbox. And sometimes it might take me a few days to respond or a couple of weeks even, but I do read them and they catch my eye. And so when I read that email suggesting you as an aligned guest for Mystical Sisterhood, I thought this one sounds really aligned and in congruence with what we're up to here at Mystical Sisterhood. So I wanted to say welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Maureen, for having me. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I'm really excited to speak to you now.
Yeah. One part that really intrigued me was that there were recent events, in the last few years that allowed you to bring your gifts forward into the world. And something about when you were young that your gifts were suppressed. But I always wonder, I like to go back into childhood and ask, were there any clues or anything that would suggest the line of work that you're now in?
Of course, because I think children are so very well connected to their passion, to their joy, and exploring their outer richness and inner richness. And I love to think back how I walked through childhood, and I grew up in a village of 500 people surrounded by the forest.
Mm.
So nature was really important to me, seeing the seasons change and feeling within being in a cyclic kind of year. That really shaped how I grew up. And of course, I love to sing always. And I also remember, having an experience with a bird and then dreaming about this and waking up in the morning and singing a song about a bird. And I guess I was like 4 or 5. And I loved these mornings of me just waking up in bed and yeah, connecting with the dreams through music. And that's what I've been doing over the past, I don't know, 20 years as a professional musician. So it gave the
Mhm.
direction that that my senses are open
Yeah.
and somehow they want to flow through me again in form of energy or frequency.
That's beautiful. And it sounds like there's a real awareness and presencing to what's coming through you and wants to inform what you do in your waking life, what you choose.
Yeah, thank you. But as you've mentioned, it hasn't been always that clear.
Mhm.
And that clarity came to me over the past years, but it took some time to allow those gifts coming through and acknowledging
Mhm.
them and letting go of the fear that was attached
Yeah.
and embracing this, embracing a new way of embodying maybe life.
If you look at yourself and you see the parts that were possibly more in resistance or not allowance of what was coming forth, what were some key things that you were able to almost like transform within yourself to give yourself permission and allowance to take the steps to bring a little bit more of you into the world or show more of yourself?
I think I was blessed to receive multiple impulses,
Hmm.
sometimes from the outside world, sometimes from the inner world. When you really realize you want to grow, and you're hitting some boundaries with the things you're doing, and then expanding and almost using that kind of anger, being in boundaries as a force, and let the creative spark come through. But sometimes I also needed the impulses from my outside world, from friends that tap me on my shoulder and be like, don't you think that this could be an idea, or doesn't this inspire you? So I was lucky to be open to those impulses. And to some, I simply wasn't. And
Mhm.
other ones seemed to be too scary and needed more time to evolve, one thing after another.
Yes. And I really feel that it's a combination, like you're saying, of the inner and the outer, and that in the times when we cannot access the parts of ourselves that are going to be a little more courageous or
Yeah,
allow that those parts of ourselves to be seen by the outside world,
totally.
then we lean on the trusted people we know that
Yes.
can see us. And I do feel like for this podcast in Mystical Sisterhood, I when I set out to do this, I didn't know what it was and I trusted it. And I love the part of it that shines the light on the person next to me, because one revelation that is really coming through strongly for me is that we are all each other's teachers. And
Mhm.
so when a woman or individual sees you saying, I wasn't always that person who put these pieces of me out for on display. And there's a lot of safety we must feel inside,
Yeah,
both
yeah.
inner and outer as well. But
Yeah,
I really honor just the sharing of those vulnerable parts of ourselves that are tender. And when we can see that in each other, we know that, oh, look what she's doing. And I'm going to listen to her story and I'm going to lean in and see what she's saying.
absolutely.
It's a beautiful process. Did you feel in your, if I go back to your childhood, that your environment promoted or elevated some of the gifts or your kind of, I don't want to say strengths, but the gifts that you had? Or did you grow up in an environment that where they were not cultivated as much?
My joy for music and for singing, like, really was very present
Hmm.
at home, and I really loved that. And also the joy for playing and for going outside and connecting with nature
Yeah.
and experiencing a really idyllic and calm
Hmm.
childhood. So in the country, having had this space, not only physical geographically, in looking into the wild, into the forest, but also having time for myself, even as a kid,
Hmm.
and then connecting those worlds
Hmm.
and dedicating more time to fantasy or dreams.
Yeah.
That was something really beautiful and something I very much enjoyed,
Hmm.
cultivated almost.
I believe too that what you're sharing about that really natural connection you had to nature and to play, I believe it's what a lot of us are attempting to reclaim in our
Mhm.
lives, whether we're in the middle of our life, or I see even 20s and 30-year-olds wanting to reclaim that. But there's something happening right now where we're being called back to nature, to
Yes,
like the sacred and the
yeah,
slowness. And you feel that too?
absolutely, absolutely. I feel like this big topic to me is so big because to me it's intertwined in the shift that we're collectively experiencing right now, from the very linear, faster, stronger,
Yeah.
better,
Hmm.
and realizing that this strategy is not serving anyone on the planet. It
Hmm.
doesn't serve Earth.
Hmm.
And there have to be new ways of thriving through a year. And I feel like that people connect more with what's going on in front of their eyes and in
Hmm.
their world.
Mm.
Also, because we're forced to, because Mother Earth is like calling us, look
Yeah.
what is happening here,
Hmm.
look, humans. And I also feel like when beauty in nature arises, we're perhaps a little bit more open, a little bit more receptive, because it becomes so unusual. I almost want to say the perfectness in nature.
Hmm.
it's also, I don't want to say fading, but it's changing.
Mm.
And I feel like this helps the human to
Hmm.
see the beauty in it when the portion becomes smaller.
So thank you for sharing that. And before we started, I'll always do intention setting and grounding. And I loved the way I began and then invited you to share.
Yeah.
And I loved the way that you blessed and held such reverence to the land that is holding us and the
Yeah.
connection. You're in Berlin, I'm in Chicago. Can you say more about that? Why that's important to you?
I feel like we sometimes forget that the earth is not just a planet, but what nourishes us, what gives us food, what gives us water, air, fire, all the elements.
Yeah.
And we're just visitors here on earth. And collectively, the earth has been treated so badly. And this is reflected in how the collective is treating each other and dividing each other. And I feel like in this whole patriarchal system that we're in, we forgot that the land and Mother Earth is something that nourishes us. We just
Mhm.
cannot only grow without making sure that planet Earth, Mother Earth, is healthy to provide our growth.
Do you feel that Mother Earth is a living, breathing organism who we can also speak to and communicate with?
Absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. Anything else would be weird because I feel like everything literally is energy. You know, that's simply physics. That's not a neo-spiritual thing
Mhm.
that I'm saying here. And I feel like we have to be aware of this. And so we're somehow contributing, we're somehow receiving, we're exchanging, in some form of communication. And again, to realize the ground we're walking on, in the ground that is feeding us and has been nourishing us to be, we should give some gratitude simply
Mhm.
for walking on land that has been experiencing so much trauma thanks
Mhm.
to us. I'm sitting in Berlin. I feel like it's due
It,
and our gratitude and energy in action and invite the earth energy into our actions.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful and it's not been said in these ways or even spoken about in this fullness in any of my episodes so far that I can remember. I stood in last week's full moon with my son. We went out to the front of the house. I live outside of the city, so it's dense, an urban area. We have to go to particular places to see the moon. And I was saying I think that something that's been coming up for me is just the magnificence of it all. And I said to my son, he just turned 24, but gravity is rooting us to the ground. The energy around us plus gravity keeps us standing up. It's also, I always used to, when I was younger, think like this is an aside, but related that I didn't understand science fiction and I didn't pursue those kind of books or movies. And I still haven't gone back and looked, and yet I know that there's truth in a lot of what was offered there. I think science fiction, that's about the world around us, the mysteries, the mystique, what we don't know. It's just a fascinating concept to me now. Oh my gosh. Early on, I always refer to it, but Heather Hansen said, "What if everything was sacred? What if everything was a miracle?" She was a guest on an early podcast. And it never really left my mind because it is so true. So, with
Mhm.
that, I want to segue into how your work has transformed and what are you bringing out into the world now?
Right now, I'm working a lot with crystalline sound bowls and my
Mm,
voice. And very often I invite people to sonic ceremonies where I serenade them in the duet with the crystalline sound bowls and my voice. And I always work with the intention and very often actually with the moon, La Luna, and
mm,
where she is in the sky. And yeah, I enjoy this very much. Also, teaching and sharing wisdom about the voice in workshops
mhm,
and singing together with people, which is very joyful. And when we speak about the before, my before ended in 2019 because I used to be a touring musician with a band and recording a record, and that was like where all my intention, yes, and attention was. And then we all experienced the pandemic, and these brought so many shifts in and so many routines I was asked to let go of.
Mhm.
Some were serving me and some were just making me really sad. And this gave me the opportunity to use the space to explore what other ways are there for
Mhm.
me other than touring with a band, and how can I use my sonic abilities or how I perceive sound to serve others. And that was something really beautiful, that shift from sharing myself on
Mhm.
stage with excellent music,
Mhm.
but drawing it back inwards and holding space for a smaller group of people.
Mhm. Beautiful. Yeah, I was able to watch the video where you were doing the sonic healing, the sound, the crystalline bowls
Yeah.
alongside your voice in Berlin. And that was just a beautiful ceremony. And to watch people's response to as soon as they get into that room, I feel like that. Tell me about that. Like I saw you see people
Yeah.
just drop into another dimension almost.
Yeah, thank you for watching the video and for sharing your thoughts and feelings with me. Yeah, that was an incredible evening and something I really wanted to test out how a concert scenario could work for me with the bowls and the band. And I work with the ground, and so a fellow medium and I were in conversation with the ground in the room before,
Mm,
connecting, asking for permission, saying
yes.
we're out there. Not only walking to the venue and talking to the team and the crew there, but asking the ground, what would serve you? What do you need? What are your preferences? Just
Yeah.
so we knew, and we got permission, which was great. And I think I was there once or twice before with the sound bowls to
Mhm.
tune into the room, so getting the vibe of the room and the sound. And I was so blessed with an amazing team that made sure that the room looked nice. The carpets were in the right spots and the sitting groups and the candles. So energetically, the energy could flow. That was a priority, that the room was able to work with what we were offering. And
Mhm.
I feel like it is, like you said, it's sensible. I'm so grateful that it's also visible.
And so within those ceremonies that you offer, do people come soak in that energy, the vibration, and then leave? Do they have time at the end to share their experience, or how do you like to run the evening?
Yeah, so well, usually when I do the ceremonies, it's for maybe 12-ish people,
Mhm.
and we're almost sitting in a circle. And I will share a little bit about the energy of the day or the sequences of days that we're in, and share our intention of the evening. And then
Mhm.
we do a collective grounding exercise, and I asked the audience to lay down and get really comfortable.
Yeah.
And this is where, when I'm starting becoming a channel and singing and playing the crystalline bowls for maybe 45 minutes. And I'm very open in this part. So I might have some information that will be intertwined into what I'm speaking or what I'm singing. But mostly it's just like letting it flow through,
Mhm.
and maybe giving the audience some words, some pictures that they can follow through the
Mhm.
soundtrack or the experience a bit more. Sorry.
Yeah.
And yeah, after the musical part, I give my audience a lot of time to come back, because this experience is so individual for every human being.
Mhm.
And I just like that they have time to come back and we're not like checking the clock.
Mhm.
So when everyone
Mhm.
is back and has a cup of tea, then if they would like to, they can share, but no one is forced to.
Mhm.
And I'm always like very open for feedback. I love to hear what people experience and what their courage is of sharing,
Right.
because those moments are so, can be so vulnerable, and your subconsciousness just has room to
Mhm.
share.
Mhm.
And yeah, I appreciate it a lot when people say a few things afterwards.
Ooh, it sounds exquisite. I can picture you. I will, in the show notes, put a link to that Berlin video so anyone who wants to
Thank
access
you.
it. And I can see you. It feels like you're just the crown chakra is just open and that flow of information. Did you always know that you received information from, your spirit guides or your guidance team, or is that a newer revelation for you?
No, I wasn't clear about this. Like, where this is coming from? Who is this? Is it okay? Or is it some craziness, you know? I was not sure for a very long time. And again, not sure if it's all right to receive. And yeah, it took some training, actually, and a lot of training to really differentiate where the channel is like open and what am I receiving, who is speaking, and uh, yeah, but I'm very glad that I could embrace the idea of being a channel and not having to think that everything just comes from my human mind,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is a bit narrow.
Sounds like you've spent so many years with your music, your singing, your kind of the sound healing. So I'm sure in some ways it is second nature, but it's also, it feels like within those moments, a trust that you've blessed the ground, you've blessed the space, you've communicated clearly with your team, you've welcomed warmly the audience, and then everything is set up for, it feels like both you and the listener, the participant, to receive. And what do you believe is, I'm sure it's different for everyone, but what is received when people open themselves up to this sound healing and sound input and influence?
Yeah, I'd like to give a rather more physical
Mhm.
explanation. So, we all know that we are about 70% water in our bodies. And when playing the frequencies, when playing the sound bowls, like waves, sound waves are emitted and they will touch the water in your body. And a process is starting because you're starting vibing and the body is just changing its status quo.
Mm,
And in which direction this is changing, I don't know about this, but something else, when we listen to those sound waves, especially emitted through the quads, our brain gets invited to slow down. And this is where the body can access a very relaxed state, where we can access a little bit more of the subconsciousness and give the body the space to do whatever it's in its hands, like literally, to restore imbalance.
beautiful.
Our bodies are so smart,
Ooh.
so much smarter again than a simple human brain. And sometimes it takes space,
Hmm.
space, pauses, and things can unfold that we don't direct,
Yeah,
but give
I love that.
permission.
Beautiful benefit. And the word that's coming to my mind is coherence. And I think that I've read some about that, even with a tuning fork, the vibration, that the cells in our body actually, if they're more in separation, let me say, that they will actually be able to see them come together. So
Mm.
I love that. Are there ways that people can access your music online where this is available to, if we're not, we're not in your town, we're not with you, that we can experience?
On my Patreon,
Hmm.
there are a lot of sound healings
Hmm.
available to download and to listen to. Also, when you register to my newsletter, you'll be provided with a short sound healing sequence. I think it's about 15 minutes and maybe perfect just to implement this in your week or into your days.
Hmm. I love that. And is that what we've described, even talking about the ceremony that you held in Berlin? And I'm calling it ceremony because it feels sacred to me. Is it within the music that those gifts we talked about the psychic gifts, but then you had mentioned in the reach out that you love the tarot. And so are there just these different modalities and different resources that inspire your journey where you're learning and also giving back of your gifts?
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like a spider's web where everything is intertwined and it's sharing its own story of frequency. And when we speak about the tarot, it's the symbolism. Symbolism has always been in my lyrics, always been in my poetry, always been in my imagination. And bringing it all together seemed a little bit abstract, I have to say, a couple of years back when I didn't want to see the full picture.
Mhm.
But now, 4 years in a different perspective, I can see also in early music recordings that it's always been there. And in the process of writing my latest record, The Cycle, which came out in April, I wrote about the heroine's journey through
Mhm.
transformation. And throughout the process, which was 7 years long, I learned that it's a universal story, and there is so much symbolism in the wheel of the year and the tarot, and it's a journey, it's hero's journey. Everything is just intertwined, and this tells me, this is not just not coming from my mind, but it's
Mhm.
coming from inspiration that maybe has touched and kissed me ever since I was alive, but now had this moment to bring it, to intertwine it into my own way, into my own
Yeah.
music.
That's stunning. That's so beautiful. And I think that so many can relate to the part of the journey where you have all the pieces and
Yeah,
they feel like the puzzle that's not yet,
yeah,
coming
yes,
together yet. Just as you go along and you're putting that one foot in front and you're trusting and you're hitting roadblocks and you're hitting resist, but that it does come together. I always say that about this podcast too. I know, but I don't know. And I'm willing not to know and just trust. Like, why,
yes,
Maureen, why did you do this? Why are you bringing healers together? Why are
yeah.
you so attracted to the mystical? And one thing that's come to me recently is, and I didn't realize it till now, was I'm remembering. And
Yeah.
you also, before we hit record, you invited in our ancestors and our spirit teams. And I love the ancestral part. It dawned on me that so often, I think in healing work, the ancestors can be, oh, this is the patterns that were perpetuated. And it's almost like the more what we would view as negative parts of the
Yeah.
ancestry. But in truth, they're lining up behind us or
Oh,
wherever that is,
yes.
and in full support and cheering us on as we transform longstanding patterns that I don't know if they were that transformable before this time. We're living in such a prosperous and time of possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And time of reconnection. And I
Mm,
can totally confirm what you're saying. I just had the experience of having short sessions that were called deceased communication with your deceased loved ones for
mhm,
a digital summit here
mhm,
in Germany. And
mhm.
so it was a lot of short sessions with different clients. And it was so beautiful to be that channel where so much love and wisdom is pouring down to the living person.
Yeah.
And I feel like what you said is so true, all those patterns or those traits that we just inherited, but maybe also don't know why we're still repeating the pattern or why we're still doing this, though it doesn't serve us. And the words of an ancestor can be really healing here.
Mm,
And that's just something really, really beautiful to witness.
that is. I think sometimes as individuals, we can be so hard on ourselves and say, why hasn't this changed for me yet? But I'm becoming more aware that what I carry is not all mine.
Yeah,
And it's no wonder that it feels difficult to transform because I'm carrying my mother, my grandmother, her mother.
yeah,
And how can we hold ourselves with just such compassion and know that there's just that possibility of change and growth and the letting go?
yeah. I mean, compassion and being gentle, allowing ourselves to become more authentic,
Mm,
taking the pressure out of having to be that woman,
mhm,
that girl, that person,
mhm,
allowing that these roles, can go back to their senders. And if
Yeah.
we realize we are the sender, then it also needs compassion.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
the realization is always something very beautiful, and also complimenting yourself
mhm,
for the little parts and the big steps, and also being compassionate and gentle when you still tap into a pattern or
mhm,
repeat something, and maybe feeling shame or feeling anger, and also allowing yourself to feel those emotions from different perspective.
mhm. And that going back to what you were sharing in the beginning about everything is energy. And if our experiences in the past and the emotions in our body are energy, then energy is transmutable.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful thing. So, with that's part of my gratitude for you being here is that you're bringing forth a body of work that is very unique, and it's just your unique blueprint. And that's one of my hopes through Mystical Sisterhood is that these different ways of understanding ourselves through these healing arts and mystical arts and in sound and this reverence to the land and whatever it is, you brought forth so much today that lends to an individual's transformation. And that is, I'm deeply grateful for. And that's what this is all about, just a platform to share that perfect message for just the right moment in time. Someone might hear it or might then have a resource to work with themselves. So I'm grateful for that.
Thank you.
As we go towards the end of our conversation today, is there anything that is coming to your mind you would love to share? Or obviously, it's a relatively short conversation in our lives. Is there anything coming to mind that's important for you to share? And if you feel complete, that's okay too.
Yeah, thank you again, Maureen, and everyone who listened to us speaking. It's very joyful. And yeah, thank you for being receptive and hopefully being inspired.
Mhm.
And something that comes and really wants to be outspoken right now is the energy of shame. And it comes up again because you asked a question about how can we be more gentle
Mhm.
towards ourselves. And perhaps we all want to be a little bit more inspired when shame comes up in
Mhm.
our system, and then also stepping back and being very gentle to ourselves and having a look at this shame and reflecting on whether it's still contemporary in 2024 to be ashamed of what
Mhm.
you're ashamed for.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I feel like this is also where we have our ancestral patterns to maybe crack a little bit when we realize we're carrying shame or anger or something else that somehow is connected to words that maybe got into the world 100 years ago,
Mhm.
realizing we're in 2024
Mhm.
and we can speak it out
Mhm.
without carrying the shame.
Yeah, it's a beautiful offering and reflection. And I've been thinking about that and this idea of, I've been thinking about it as a modern mystic. And what is that? What does the modern mystic look like? And what I know is that it is not just the spiritual gifts or that authentic self coming forward, it's the healing of the shame and emotions that maybe came from our childhood and again ancestrally, and it's doing many sides of the work, and that to me is a modern take on it. So thank you for adding that word contemporary and that invitation. That's we're here to do this. I wouldn't be here for us if we weren't here to be with it and again transmute it and alchemize it.
Yeah.
So I've mentioned your beautiful YouTube video, and you mentioned getting onto your website and the email list, which is beautiful. I love that. I'm going to do that myself. And anywhere else that the listeners can find you, or the different ways that you work that we also haven't included.
Yeah, so I really appreciate it if you sign up to my newsletter, because I try to be really honest in what drives me throughout the month in the newsletter. And there you also find all my offerings. And may they be like the sonic ceremonies or working one-on-one with me or just seeing what I'm musically up to. And of course, I'm on Instagram as well. And if you're curious to look a little bit more into the sound healing and essays about symbolism and my musical life, then go and check out Patreon.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing everything today and being here for myself and the listeners.
Thank you. Thank you for the space.
Yes. And to the listeners, we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for being here. Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical Sisterhood. To learn more about my one-on-one coaching programs or join the Mystical Sisterhood membership, visit maureenspielman.com or mysticalsisterhood.com. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next episode.